From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Welcome to the 2015 National Book Festival and the Poetry and Prose Pavilion. This pavilion, or room, is sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts. So on behalf of everybody at the NEA and our chairman, Jane Chu, thank you for joining us. My name is Eleanor Billington, and I manage the Poetry Out Loud program at the Arts Endowment. So what is Poetry Out Loud? You may know a little bit about it. You may have heard from some Girl Scouts in the hall about this program, and that's why you're in this space, which is great. We welcome you. Poetry Out Loud started in 2005, and it started as a partnership between the National Endowment for the Arts, the Poetry Foundation, and 53 state and jurisdictional arts agencies. So that means that this program is in every state all over the country. It's also in the District of Columbia, right where we are today. It's in Puerto Rico, and we have a program in the U.S. Virgin Islands. What Poetry Out Loud does is it encourages young people across the country, much like these three sitting on stage with me, to learn about classic and contemporary poetry through memorization and public recitation. Poetry Out Loud helps students master public speaking skills, it helps them build self-confidence, and most importantly, it helps them learn about their literary heritage. Now, I know this may sound a little dry to you, and it's early on Saturday morning, so thank you for being here, but I promise that once these students take the podium, you'll see how lively and transformative poetry recitation can be. It's truly incredible. So a little bit more about the program. Poetry Out Loud uses a pyramid structure, which means that, like the spelling bee, we start at the classroom level, and then winners advance from the classroom level. They go up to a school competition possibly, and then maybe a regional competition before they get to the state finals, and ultimately the national finals, which is held right here in Washington, D.C. In late spring every year. So if you're an interested high school student in the audience, talk with your teachers about Poetry Out Loud and let them know that you want to be involved in this program. It is not too late to get involved this year. If you're an interested high school teacher in the audience, thank you for being here. Please come and talk to us. We have some POL swag in the back table, right where there are a couple NEA staff back there. We'd be happy to talk to you more about the program. We also have a great website dedicated to Poetry Out Loud. It's poetryoutloud.org, and it includes more than 800 poems, video recitations, and a comprehensive teacher's guide, and a lot of other tips for students for reciting, and some great interviews with past students who have participated in the program. So last year marked our 10th anniversary for this program, and since 2005, we've reached nearly 3 million students across the country and 45,000 teachers, which is pretty incredible. We're very proud of this. Last year alone, we had more than 375,000 students participate. And today you're actually going to hear from 3 of those students. So not only did they make it to the top 9 at the national finals, they are 3 out of 375,000. So again, it's truly incredible that they're here. These students are eligible for prizes. So if you participate in Poetry Out Loud, you're eligible for prizes at the state and national level of competition. This includes a $20,000 prize for the national champion, which is nothing to scoff at. Every year, Poetry Out Loud awards more than $100,000 in prizes and school stipends for the purchase of poetry materials. Now, we believe that prizes are great. The most important reward, though, the most important thing about this program is the way in which a student connects with great writing and great stories through the poems that they memorize. So the U.S. Poet Laureate Juan Felipe Herrera, who formally takes office next week, and he's actually here at the festival this weekend, he was being interviewed by The Guardian, and this was back in June when he was first announced as the next Poet Laureate. And in that interview, he said this about the power of the written and spoken word. He says, "Poetry is one of the largest, most beautiful, most intimate, and most effective ways of participating in public life." So by reciting for you today, these students are engaging you in public discourse. They're inviting you to experience the beauty of a poem taken off the page. And it is a treat, it really is, so please listen up to them. All right, we're gonna get started with introducing our first student. Paris Stout is the 2015 Poetry Out Loud state champion from Georgia, and she was the first runner-up at the national finals last April. She finished in 2nd place overall, and she is a recent graduate of Paulding County High School and is attending Georgia State University, where she studies international economics and looks forward to a career in public policy. Paris enjoys classical and young adult literature and has no plans to abandon her 2 passions, reading and writing. Please join me in welcoming Paris to the podium.
Hello, everyone. So today I'll be reciting 2 poems, and the first of which is called A Psalm of Life by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. What the heart of the young man said to the psalmist. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow find us farther than today. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still, like muffled drums, are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb, driven cattle. Be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, howe'er unpleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us that we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's solemn main, seeing, shall take heart again. Let us then be on and going, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. The second poem I'll be reciting is called Gitanjali 35 by Rabindranath Tagore. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not been dried up into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father. Let my country awake.
Thank you, Paris. Next up is the 2015 Poetry Out Loud Wisconsin State Champion, Ian Walls. Ian was one of the top 9 national finalists at this year's competition in DC. He is a recent graduate of Milwaukee High School of the Arts and just began his freshman year at the University of Vermont. Ian has always enjoyed writing and is the screenwriter of the award-winning indie film, The Vampire Formerly Known as Dracula, which follows Dracula's desperate struggle to find love in a twilight-besieged modern America. Ian fell in love with recitation as soon as he was introduced to the Poetry Out Loud program in 9th grade. Please welcome Ian Walls.
Hi, everybody. I've got 2 poems to do today, and the first one is going to be The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again. But now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. And on a lighter note, this will be Hysteria by Dionisio D. Martinez. For Ana Menendez. It only takes one night with the wind on its knees to imagine Carl Sandburg unfolding a map of Chicago, puzzled, then walking the wrong way. The lines on his face are hard to read. I alternate between the TV, where a plastic surgeon is claiming that every facial expression causes wrinkles, and the newspaper. I picture the surgeon reading the lines on Sandburg's face, lines that would have made more sense if the poet had been, say, a tree growing in a wind orchard. Maybe he simply smiled too much. I'm reading about the All-Star game, thinking that maybe Sandburg saw the White Sox of 1919. I love American newspapers, the way each section is folded independently and believes it owns the world. There's this brief item in the international pages. The Chinese government has posted signs in Tiananmen Square forbidding laughter. I'm sure the plastic surgeon would approve. He'd say, the Chinese will look young much longer, their faces unnaturally smooth. But what I see, although no photograph accompanies the story, is laughter bursting inside them. I go back to the sports section and a close-up of a rookie in mid-swing. His face keeping all the wrong emotions in check. When I read, I bite my lower lip, a habit the plastic surgeon would probably call cosmetic heresy because it accelerates the aging process. I think about Carl Sandburg and the White Sox. I think about wind in Tiananmen Square, how a country deprived of laughter ages invisibly. I think of the great walls of North America, each of them a grip on some outfield like a rookie's hands around a bat when the wind is against him. I bite my lower lip again. I want to learn to think in American, to believe that a headline is a fact, and all stories are suspect.
Ian, thank you, Ian. That was great. And finally, we welcome the 2015 Alaska State Champion, who is also our Poetry Out Loud National Champion for this year, Meva Ordonez. Meva is a recent graduate of West Anchorage High School in Anchorage, Alaska, and just began her freshman year at Columbia University in New York City, where she is a Gates Millennium Scholar. Meva enjoys hiking, baking pies, writing poetry, and visiting family in Mexico. Her favorite writers include Jorge Luis Borges, Wallace Stevens. Meva will be featured at the International Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee next month. Please join me in welcoming Meva.
Thank you all for coming here this morning. So I'll be reciting two poems. My first poem is Ode on a Grecian Urn by John Keats. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme? What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape? Of deities, or mortals, or of both, in Tempe or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maidens loath? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore ye soft pipes play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared, pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. Fair youth, beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal. Yet do not grieve, she cannot fade. Though thou hast not thy bliss, forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. Ah, happy, happy boughs, that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu. And happy melodist, unwearied, forever piping songs forever new, more happy love, more happy, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever panting and forever young, all breathing human passion far above. That leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadest thou that heifer lowing at the skies? and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? What little town by river or seashore, or mountain built with peaceful citadel, is emptied of this folk, this pious morn? And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can e'er return. O Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought, with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou silent form, dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity, cold pastoral. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain, in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. Thank you very much. The next poem I will be reciting is called Zacuan Papalotls by Brenda Cárdenas. We are space between the black-orange blur of a million monarchs on their two-generation migration. South to fur-crowned Michoacan, where tree trunks will sprout feathers, a forest of paper-thin wings. Our Mexica cocooned the membranes of La Madre Tierra say, we are reborn Zacuan Papalotls. Mariposas negras y aranjaras, in whose sweep the dead whisper. We are between the flicker of a chameleon's tail that turns his desert blue backbone to jade or pink sand. The snake-skinned fraternal twins of solstice and equinox, the ashen dawn, silvering dusk, la oración as it leaves the lips, the tug from sleep, the glide into dreams that husk out mestizo memory. We are one life, passing through the prism of all others, gathering color and song, cempasúchil and drum, to leave a rhythm scattered in the wind, dust tinting the tips of fingers as we slip into our new light. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you. It was a beautiful way to start a Saturday morning. Let's give the students one more round of applause, please. So right now we have a little bit of time left for Q&A with the students. So we have some questions we'd like to ask them. If you all are interested in asking them anything, please feel free to come up to the microphones on either side of the room. If you have a question for anyone on stage, it can be for, in general, for all the students, and I'll help facilitate that process. We're getting them mic'd up right now. So if you just joined us, this is Poetry Out Loud. This is a program that's sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Poetry Foundation. It's a student recitation competition. So all through the school year, from starting now in September all the way to April, students are learning poems by heart, and they're reciting them in competition across the country. So this is a program that's available to all high school students. If you all are interested, we have great information in the back of the room. So let's get started. Paris, why don't we talk to you first? You can stay right there. You don't have to go anywhere. So we talked a little bit when I was introducing the program about how to get involved with this, and I'm curious how you got involved. Did your teacher ask you to do Poetry Out Loud? Did you hear about the program and want to participate? You can be honest.
Actually, in my school for my senior year, every senior was actually told to participate in our high school competition.
You're invited to participate, maybe. Yeah.
So naturally, of course, every single senior in my school had to go out and look on the Poetry Out Loud anthology and pick one poem. And of course, as I was picking out poems and everything, I originally picked Ode on a Grecian Urn, which you heard Mava recite. And of course, I recited that at my school, and I was picked among the top 3 in my language arts class. And from there, I performed in my high school competition, and I won. So it was a very big turn of events because I originally did not even know this was considered a national competition. I just thought it was something my school did to make us learn about poetry.
And now look at it. It's not so bad.
Look at me,
Right?
I'm here now.
Look at where poetry can take you. It's true. A lot of students get involved because their teacher says, hey, we're doing this as a class. It's going to be good. And a lot of students really are changed. Their perception of poetry changes a lot. And I think, these students are honest about that. Ian, how did you pick your poems? You recited today 2 very different poems. What was the process like? Paris talks about going through 800 poems in an online anthology. That's got to be a lot of fun, but also really challenging. So how did you choose?
I definitely have a soft spot for light poems, which is what I always try and find first. And then I feel like I have to beat myself up to find something that's deeper and darker. So I found Hysteria, and I fell in love with it, and it was just amazing, and all my teachers loved it. They were like, go for it, Ian, it's great. And then my English teacher, who also runs Poetry Out Loud at our school, said, but maybe also something else. So I found The Second Coming, which is a poem that I really like, but it's definitely darker, not as light and, uptone as Hysteria, but I definitely do feel like I like that contrast that I found.
Yeah, thank you. So, Mava, you're going to school now in Columbia. Everybody up on stage is a freshman in college. Do you have plans for poetry during college? Or what are you gonna study while you're up in New York?
Well, right now I'm planning on studying computer science and minoring in either applied mathematics or economics. But I certainly plan to continue with poetry. I do write my own poetry, and I'm looking forward to getting involved in the slam poetry scene in New York City. And I've also been invited by the Teachers and Writers Collaborative Organization and New York Poetry Out Loud program to participate in their different events. And so I'm looking forward to continuing my involvement with the Poetry Out Loud program and with poetry in high school, and in university.
Yeah. How did you get involved at your school in Alaska?
So it's actually mandatory in a lot of the English classes at my high school, but there's also some monetary prizes. So there's some students who aren't mandated to participate in the program, they still do because some of them are motivated, by the prizes, or others are just interested in having that new experience. And so I was involved with it my freshman and sophomore years. My sophomore year, I nearly won the school competition, and so that really motivated me the next year to practice more, and I was hoping to win the school competition and go on to the district competition, and to my surprise, I won that one as well, and then I went to the state and I won that as well, so I went to the national level. And so I had a year of experience going to the national competition prior to winning Poetry Out Loud, and I think that was really important because it helped me get a feel for what the judges are looking for and what I could do to improve my recitations.
Yeah. And so Ian and Paris talked a little bit about how they chose poems. How did you come to the Cardenas and the Keats poem, and what was that process like for you?
So I'm like Paris. I went through the entire anthology, and I chose Zakon Papalotls. It was actually one of the first poems because I went from Z to A instead of vice versa. And that was a poem that really spoke to me because it talks about the blending of cultures to create a new one, in this case, Chicano culture. And as a Mexican American who's had those experiences, that's a poem that really spoke to me. And so that was the first poem that I chose, and that's a poem that I've been reciting for the past 3 years. The second poem I chose, which was Ode on a Grecian Urn, that was actually one we studied in English class during our poetry unit. And so for me, the conflict that the speaker is facing in the poem while he examines this urn that has this eternal image, but the urn itself is not eternal. That was something that for me it was confusing. But after we went over it together as a class, I came to a better understanding of a poem, and so that's the second one that I chose to recite.
That's great. I think we have one question from the audience. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. These are wonderful, wonderful recitations, really professional. I'm wondering, since each one of you did a poem that I would consider a difficult poem, I'm wondering what process you go through in order to understand the deeper meanings of the poem, and then what does the poem actually begin to mean for you?
Paris, do you want to start?
Okay.
Do you
okay.
mind? Sorry to put you on the
Oh,
spot.
no, it's
since
fine.
you're right
I was
here.
about to say, how are we going to do this? But I know for me, because I'm drawn, I guess, more to difficult styled poems. For me, first and foremost, I'll spend at least a week just doing nothing but just reciting the poem over and over and over again, so I can know all the words. And so that way, every single one of the old English style words don't confuse me. But once I memorize a poem, and I guess in the process of me actually learning each word, which, by the way, in that process, a dictionary is your best friend, there's one part of you that begins to understand the poem more as you begin to say it, and then as you go online and you research who that author was, and you might find other people that have recited that same poem, and you listen to how they interpreted it, there's always this level of what the poet themselves wanted you to take out of their poem, but also what each and every one of us take out of a poem, because it can always be different. For the poem I recited a minute ago, A Psalm of Life, of course, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, of course, he meant for that poem to naturally just be a bit of an argument against the modern day psalmists who were depressing and sad, and there's no point in the world, and everything's depressing all the time. And of course, he chose to argue that. He chose to say that, no, that's not what life is. Life is far more exciting than what we're giving credit for. And of course, that was something that really spoke to me. I thought, yeah, I like the message that he was trying to bring out. And at the same time, I also put my own sort of interpretation onto it, because there's so many things in my own life that might have gotten, well, things that might not have turned out the way I wanted to, and yet there are things such as Poetry Out Loud that turned out so much greater than I expected. And it's just that toss-up of how life isn't what you're always going to expect it to be, but you're always going to have fun along the way. And I guess it's just, poetry is always what you make out of it. And once you learn these types of poems, that's when you really get to understand the meaning of each and every one of them, as well as getting to understand a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you. Ian, do you want to talk a little bit to the question about how you prepare? How do you tackle these hard poems?
I've got to give a lot of credit to my English teacher from high school, Catherine Catter. She is amazing. Poetry Out Loud is something that everybody at our school has to do, but if anybody has any kind of real interest in it, she will sit down with you and she will work all of this out. Memorization was the easy part for me, but then finding the meaning in these poems was more difficult. And definitely having her there was a major help for me. I don't think I could have done it without her. And what really helps me specifically in gaining a deeper understanding to a poem is actually getting up and performing it, doing it for people. I feel like I find something new in each poem every time I perform it. I can be sitting at home in front of the mirror just going over it day after day, and that doesn't do much for me. But as soon as I've got somebody there, just even one person as an audience, that I can leave them with something new, that kind of also gives me something new. I would have to say for The Second Coming especially, that was something that really helped me, because I've always liked that poem but never really understood much about it. I knew it sounded kind of almost apocalyptic a little bit, but that was all I really knew about the poem until I actually started performing it and feeling those words, and actually doing a little bit of research on William Butler Yeats helped, because he was writing this in a time where this was around the Great War, World War I, right after that, and this was really world-changing. This was the time when people were starting to really think about, well, where is the end? Because this was something that had never happened before, and he was kind of musing on that, taking his own ideas. And I don't necessarily want to say I look at it as, I clearly don't look at it as something light, but I do, after performing it, look at it maybe not so dark a future, because yes, it's a very dark poem, and yes, it's talking about these things, these kind of apocalyptic images, but also it's kind of talking about what's going to come after, because after the second coming, what happens then? I always think about that in the last line of the poem, and that's something that really interests me to think about every time I do this poem. What happens next?
So the more you dig into it, the more you find,
Yeah.
and that grows, yeah. Maeva, do you want to speak to it a little bit, or talk about how you prepared, or what the process is like for you?
I had a bit of a similar experiences as Paris and Ian. Well, how I started out was I had a group of poems. I had picked out finally 5, 6 poems that I was thinking about reciting. And I actually went through and analyzed all of them, first of all. And from there, that's how I decided which of the 2 really spoke to me and which ones I was going to recite. And from there, I had my sister help me on a daily basis. I would recite. She sometimes would get really annoyed because I'd be constantly coming to her like, hey, can you listen to this part? Can you listen to this part? But she was amazing. She helped me every single day with my recitation. She would tell me, you need to lower your voice here, or you need to add fluctuation. Maybe don't do this hand motion, or try this and see how it feels. So she was essential when it came to preparing for the competition. And my friends helped me as well, and my teachers at school, especially with Ordonez and Earn. My English teacher and other teachers from in the English department at my school would help me analyze the poem, and then they'd help me with my recitations, and they'd also give me a lot of great advice. I think for me, for both Ordonez and Earn and for Zacco and Papalotls, it took me a while to finally come up with how my recitation style and how I was going to present the poem, because I felt like I had the obligation to present what the author was trying to say in the proper manner. So I spent a lot of time practicing, but as I said, first for me came the analyzation of the different poems, and then at the end recitations. I think that analyzation was really important for me to be able to come up with the correct gestures, the correct fluctuation, the correct tone that I would take when it came to presenting the poems.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Please go ahead, and if you need, speak up if you can, since the mic, sorry. Can you help her? Thank you, sir. There we go.
What age did you guys start doing your poems?
Well, the competition starts in high school. So when you're in high school, you can, as soon as you enter your freshman year, you can start participating in the Poetry Out Loud competition. For me, I know the school competition was in January, and I think for a lot of schools it takes place around that time. But then there's the school competition, there's the regional competitions and state competitions. So you have a lot of opportunities in the future.
And you can start learning now if you'd like to. Everything is free and available on our website. So there are a lot of poems there, all different kinds of poems. So you heard 6 today. There's 894 more that you can look at, and they're all free and online. We also have a lot of free swag in the back of the room. That was all we have time for, actually. So thank you guys again for being here. Thank you to these students.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.